I'm doing good, working my ass off, keeping busy, and playing together with Transatlantic has been a lot of fun. It's our first time touring in, I guess, 9 years now, and we're getting to go to places that we've never played before, like here in Spain. So we're having a great time. We're playing tighter than ever. We're getting along great. We're having a lot of fun on stage. It's a long show. It's almost 3.5 hours long to make up for lost time, and the fans seem to be loving it. Well, Transatlantic started over 10 years ago. Neil and I got together for Transatlantic, and we were joined by Pete Travis, great bass player from Marillion, and Roina Stolt from the band The Flower Kings out in Sweden. You know, the vision then is the same as what our goals and drives are now, which is to make classic progressive music. Transatlantic is not a metal band. It's more about progressive music and classic rock in the vein of, you know, Genesis and Pink Floyd and Yes and the Beatles. So it's always been, for me, about tapping into something different than what I do at Dream Theater. Yes, it's long songs and it's progressive, but it's a different kind of progressive than Dream Theater is. Well, after Neil decided to stop working with Transatlantic and Spock's Beard at the beginning of the last decade, I was fearing that we wouldn't work together anymore once he stopped working with Transatlantic, but I was very happy and honored that he asked me to continue working with him on his solo albums. So I did, I think, 5 or 6 solo albums with him through the years. And to be able to continue making music with him and having this great relationship together has been an honor and a pleasure for me. He's one of my favorite songwriters in the world. I mean, in my mind, he's up there with John Lennon and Roger Waters and Pete Townsend. That's how much his music means to me. So to continue to be a part of it is an honor. But my role with him on his solo albums and my role with him in Transatlantic are two very different types of roles. With Transatlantic, we're kind of co-captains. With his solo albums, I'm basically just coming in to play drums. I've always admired Avenged Sevenfold. I've been listening to them for years, and I've always thought they were great musicians, and I loved their ability to bounce from style to style, you know, metal and hardcore and punk and pop, you know, a little bit of everything, and I've always admired that versatility. And the Rev used to always mention me in articles, drum articles and interviews and stuff, so I was always very flattered by that and appreciative. And he and I had exchanged emails and texts through the years, and I always told him how much I loved the band and always thanked him for always being so enthusiastic about me and Dream Theater. So when he passed last year, it was a shock, and it's a huge tragedy. I mean, he was just way too young. And when the band asked me to come in and record the drums on the new album, it was an honor. I didn't even think twice about doing it. You know, to have been asked something like that under such emotional circumstances, for me, was a great honor. And I went in and did the album with them, and it was an amazing experience, a very emotional experience, very heavy emotions in the studio with those guys, and we immediately bonded. And you know, they're very much brothers. They're very much a family. Not only them as a band, but their wives and their girlfriends and their fans. It's all very much like a family. So it was very nice to be welcomed into that family with such open arms. And now I'm going to be able to play live with them for the rest of this year, which is going to be a huge amount of fun, and I'm looking forward to it. OSI started as, you know, an opportunity for me to work with Jim Mateos. This was before Kevin Moore was even involved. And originally, I had suggested Daniel Gildenlow being involved. So my idea of OSI in the beginning was to do a more progressive metal, Dream Theater meets Fates Warning meets Pain of Salvation thing. You know, I had done progressive rock with Transatlantic, so when OSI came around, I figured it would be a cool progressive metal supergroup. And then Kevin came on board, and that kind of pushed Daniel out of the picture. And it kind of pushed me out of the picture as well. You know, what I was hoping was going to be a collaboration between me and Jim ended up becoming a collaboration between Jim and Kevin. And I was feeling my role diminish, you know, every day more and more, which was frustrating for me. You know, I was welcoming working with Kevin with open arms. I mean, I really was enthusiastic about it and looking forward to continuing a musical relationship with him, but it became apparent pretty quickly that Kevin really isn't much of a collaborator. And I've learned from doing these projects, whether it be Transatlantic or Liquid Tension Experiment, you know, it's all about the collaboration, you know, and with Kevin, he just really didn't want to collaborate. He wanted to just do his thing, and he's kind of very stubborn, I guess, or whatever, you know, when it comes to his work. So it was very frustrating for me to not be as involved as I had wanted, and after a while it started to just feel like I was a session drummer. And then when it came time for a third record, those guys knew that I wasn't interested in that situation. I don't mind being a session drummer. I do sessions with Neil Morse all the time. With Kevin, he's not that much fun. He's a little too serious. And you know, if I'm going to be a session drummer or if I'm going to work with other artists, I want to have fun doing it. And if it's not fun, then why bother? It really turned more into something completely different than I had ever done, and had a real industrial edge with a lot of drum loops and samples. I had no problem with the direction of the music. You know, in fact, OSI kind of challenged me to do something different, and that's what I love when I'm doing different projects, is doing different things. I didn't necessarily have an issue with the direction of the music. I just more had an issue of the environment of making it. After we had done 2 albums together, Jordan Rudess ended up joining Dream Theater, and at that point, it felt to me unnecessary to continue with that project because we were now incorporating that writing chemistry into Dream Theater. Well, right now there's no plans for any new Liquid Tension Experiment music, but the 4 of us had an amazing time reuniting for those live shows in 2008. So I think the 4 of us are all open to working together again in the future, whether it be live or in the studio. It's just a matter of timing and the circumstances being right. I did 4 tribute bands with Paul Gilbert, and all 4 of them were a total blast. 3 of them were mainly tributes that I couldn't really do in Dream Theater. The Beatles, Led Zeppelin, and The Who. Those 3 bands are 3 of my favorites of all time. 3 of my biggest heroes are Ringo, Keith Moon, and John Bonham. And Dream Theater doesn't really tap into those elements as much. When picking an album, you can't possibly please everybody. When we did Metallica and Maiden, the prog fans probably hated it. When, you know, doing an album like this, the metal fans are probably going to be bored to tears. You know, it's really kind of Pink Floyd in a way. As much as they're one of our biggest influences, they're really the antithesis of what Dream Theater is about. Dream Theater's adrenaline and playing and chops and technique. Doing those bands with Paul Gilbert really gave me a chance to tap into something that's such a big, big part of me and my history. And then the 4th tribute we did was a Rush tribute, which of course does have a lot in common with Dream Theater. But I just thought it would be a lot of fun to do some obscure tracks. You know, Dream Theater has always covered Rush songs as well. But with my tribute band with Paul Gilbert, it gave me a chance to do some of the more obscure, bigger tracks. You know, between the 4 tribute bands I've had and the 4 classic albums that Dream Theater's covered, I've covered 8 hugely influential bands in my life. There are a few other albums I'd like to cover with Dream Theater, you know, bands that are appropriate for Dream Theater, and then there's probably a few other tribute bands I could do with Paul Gilbert, you know, mainly stuff that's not appropriate for Dream Theater. So yeah, I mean, my mind is always spinning with ideas. It's just a matter of fitting them all into my schedule at this point. I never got to see Led Zeppelin with John Bonham. Surely that would have been incredible. I never got to see the Beatles. I've seen 3/4 of the Beatles. I've seen George, Paul, and Ringo all individually. My parents got to see the Beatles a couple times. Another one is Queen. I never got to see Queen, the classic Pink Floyd lineup. And Genesis with Peter Gabriel and Steve Hackett also would have been really cool. But other than that, I think I've seen almost every band I've ever wanted to see. And I'm a huge, huge collector of bootlegs. So, you know, I've gotten to enjoy all of those bands many, many, many times over. A few that come to mind are Roger Waters in '87, the Radio Chaos Tour. That to me was as close as I've ever been to seeing Pink Floyd. Kiss in '77 had a huge impact on me. We played, Dream Theater played some shows with Jimmy Page and Robert Plant back in the mid-90s, and I guess that was the closest I've come to seeing the magic of Zeppelin live, and I would watch them every night from the side of the stage, which was incredible. Seeing The Who do Tommy at Radio City Music Hall in '89. So these are just a few that come to mind off the top of my head. Well, I wouldn't say my house is like a museum. My basement is like a museum. The rest of my house is my wife's, you know, my wife is very much into decorating and having a normal, beautiful home. So the whole rest of the house looks like a beautiful home that you'd see on MTV Cribs, but then you go into the basement and suddenly it turns into like the Hard Rock Cafe. You know, it's just memorabilia everywhere and drum sets and autographed pictures and, you know, tens of thousands of CDs and DVDs and archives and magazines and books. So yeah, my basement is definitely like a museum. Yeah, of course, as a drummer, you know, I always see room for improvement. I wish I had more time to practice like I used to when I was younger, but my life is just very different.